Okay, so I'm here with Bert Stephani. He's a commercial and editorial photographer from Belgium. He specialises in creative portraits and lifestyle photography. He's passionate about sharing information and knowledge with others. He runs workshops, lectures and speaking engagements all over the world to meet fellow inspiring creatives. He's a FUJI X Photographer and a member of the Kage collective. Bert Stephani, welcome very much to the show.
What an intro, thank you.
How are you this fine and sunny morning, man?
I'm very, very hot. It's been crazy hot here in Belgium, and I had a pretty hard day of shooting yesterday, a pretty long day, so still a bit tired, but otherwise I'm perfectly fine.
Good man, there we go. What were you shooting yesterday? Can you disclose that, or is it still?
Yeah, I was actually at a refugee camp in Dunkirk, France.
Oh, okay.
Or near Dunkirk. I've been there last week, been there again this week. It's not an assignment or anything, it's just something that I feel I should do. Because it doesn't get much press attention anymore. A lot of people don't know, still hundreds of people out there, and yeah, I'm just trying to figure out ways to let people know that they're still there, and that you know, it's a very complicated problem, the whole refugee thing, but you know, I don't have any answers to that, but I know that we shouldn't let people live like that because it's just horrible. So yeah, that's what I've been doing yesterday, and you know, it's physically demanding to be there all day in the heat, but it's mostly emotionally also pretty hard to you know, to deal with that stuff. But yeah, I think it's also my responsibility as a storyteller to, you know, use the skills that I have not only to make money, but tell the stories that I feel that need to be told. So yeah.
And it's shining a light, isn't it, onto something that, you know, the media come in, they swoop down, they get their 5-minute soundbite, and then they're on to the next thing. And the reality for these people is that it doesn't disappear when the cameras stop rolling. And so if we as photographers can help put the spotlight back onto the people that need it most, then they're back in the public's minds, and then they can do what they need to do to help, whether that's sending aid, whether that's lobbying their government, whatever it is, but yeah, at least they're aware of the situation continuing. They don't forget about it because of the constant stream of information.
Yeah, so. Well, I think the press is doing what they can, and with the press I'm talking about, you know, the journalists and the photojournalists. We all know that it's a very, very hard time to be in that industry. And you know, those people also have to make a living, and they depend partly or largely on what their employers or the newspapers and the TV stations let them do.
Yeah.
And I think there's still a good job is done, but there's like, I'm not trying to reach the mass audience with it, although the more people I can reach, the better. But I often find that, you know, I see a lot of people, friends of mine, that put things on Facebook that are, first it made me angry, but then I try to understand why people think that way, and it's often because they're not informed and they're blown away by numbers, and you know, there's all this fear thing going on in politics all over the world, it's you know, people, they know me, so they know that if I say something, then I mean it. It doesn't, you know, that truth is a hard concept in these kind of things, but at least it's my truth, is how I experience these things. And I've been doing some work with refugees for the last year or 2 years, not anything big, nothing like big project or anything, but I feel like if I get to share some of these images, it can spark conversations, it can spark my personal account, telling that to friends and family, or you know, people that, there was a guy that I know on Facebook, and he lives actually not too far from that area, and he said, I didn't knew it was still existed. And I don't blame him because he doesn't get the information, but I'm trying to do like my little thing. I also took another photographer, an amateur photographer with me, and she can, you know, tell that story in her circle of friends and family. And I feel like there's a lot of my friends are intelligent and really nice people, but they don't have like the whole picture, and you know, it's just my responsibility to, you know, add some information to complete the picture, or at least make it a bit broader than what we see through mass media. And I know it's just a small thing, but if I can convince one or two people, and if those people can each convince one or two people, then, you know, we're gonna get there eventually.
Yeah.
And it's a naive thing, but I often call myself deliberately naive, because sometimes you have to do that to keep working on something.
Keeps you open-minded too. I think that's important. It's not to be kind of too shut in your own ways. As a photographer, you want to be open to the stories that are there. And I think it's really interesting what you were saying about two things. One, it being your responsibility, and two, like your responsibility as a storyteller. It's like, yeah, man, like this is where it's at. It's not necessarily all about, you know, going out, doing the commercial shoots, getting the money for that, you know, putting them together, then they'll sell more product or whatever it is. It's like, okay, fine, that's a component of photography, and it's an important one. Everybody benefits out of that financially, and then they can feed their families and so on. But there's so much more to it, and it's a deeper level than that. And it's, I think you're right, it comes down to telling the stories so that it's not just about a generic broad term like it's refugees coming in, but you're photographing and telling the stories of individuals, and then it becomes personal, and then it's something we can all relate to. And as I mean, I'm the same. I have this thing telling stories with my camera, and it's very much aligned with that philosophy, I think, and I fully kind of resonate with it, that you're trying to tell the stories of individual people, because the more specific you can make it to an individual, the more broadly it can relate to everybody. You know, and then it does filter out. People do talk about it.
It's the small stories that are often the best way to show the big picture in a way. And you know, like yesterday was like, you know, these people are incredibly friendly, and we spent most of our time drinking tea with these people. These people are offering tea and food to us while they have nothing. And you know, usually I've seen it before, so usually I have a pretty like professional mindset, in the sense that I know what I'm there for, and I'm on a bit of a mission. But like yesterday, I brought just before I went there, it was a bit last minute thing, and I stumbled upon two dusty boxes in my garage with like old toys from my kids, and you know, some of these toys have been in the house for 15 years, since my son was born. And I just grabbed them, and I didn't even open the boxes. It was the kids in the refugee camp that opened them, and that was a pretty hard moment, because then, you know, it's like you know, bringing clothes and everything, you know, you're doing something good with it, that's fine. But with those stories, it also became like very, very personal, and I could see, like, you know, if my kids were born in the wrong country, they would be the ones sitting outside, living outside in the forest, and receiving an old toy and be incredibly happy about it. And it's such a, you know, weird feeling, and I had to step aside for 10 minutes and sit down and process it, and I'm still kind of processing it, but it shows you how, you know, the personal component and the personal truth can add to a story.
Yeah, hugely, man. It's there, but for the grace of God, man. Any of us, we're so lucky that we're born into a part of the world that's not in a war zone, and you know, relatively affluent compared to the rest of the world and everything else. And sometimes it's easy to take that stuff for granted, and it's only when you look at just, you know, everybody's basically the same. And so when you go and you see somebody that could easily be, you know, your children, your siblings, your parents going through that same stuff, it's like, yeah, you know, wow, must really bring that home. Yeah. What was the What was your sort of like history getting into photography, and how did you get from sort of deciding that photography might be a cool thing to getting into doing it professionally, and then linking into doing this kind of work, you know, looking at something a bit more altruistic as well? How did that all? What was the genesis of all that?
I actually don't really know what sparked me to get into photography, but I know that I asked for my like 18th birthday. I asked for a camera. Asked my parents for a camera. I probably thought that it would make me look cooler for the girls or something. I don't know. But
it's definitely true.
Yeah, maybe. But certainly at that age. But yeah, I at the same time I kind of discovered some, you know, these Time Life old books in my local library. And I got this old, it was a used Praktica film SLR with 3 lenses, and then it turned out my grandfather had done some darkroom work back in the day, and he found this enlarger in the attic, and then I kind of rigged up a dark room, got some chemicals, turned like a bicycle tail light into my dark room light, and
cool.
I just started from there. And for like a year or so I experimented a bit with photography, and then I got into film school, and photography came a bit like you know, just a second thing, and I kind of forgot about it in a way. And I think when I turned like 29 or 30 or something, and I was working in TV and video industry, my neighbor got one of the first, you know, the Canon 300D, the digital Rebel, and I held it, and I knew at that point I want one. And so at that time I was doing mostly video work. I had like a full-time job, and I did some corporate video on the side. And it happened that a job came up where they asked if I could do pictures as well. And I just, sure, I can do that. And because I knew that I could buy the 300D with that kind of money. And so I went along, bought it, and then started taking pictures of my kids and everything, and I was hooked immediately, basically. And I think 2 or 3 months after I bought that camera, I said to myself, like, I want to do this all the time. I want to make this my job. And from that point on, I just started working to become a better photographer. And I think less than a year later, I started doing my first jobs. And yeah, that's basically kind of what I'm still doing, is like trying to figure this photography thing out, trying to see what I can do with it, and you know, go from there. It was a bit love at second sight, let's say.
That's an interesting way of putting it. So you had a career before doing video work, and then came into photography second. That's really interesting. Do you think that that previous experience and having kind of built up a career already in one creative field helped you build up to where you've got to now? What lessons did you learn from one that were transferable?
Well, I think it's the storytelling part is something that I benefited from a great deal. Is to have an idea about how can you tell a story to a certain audience, because that's what I did. I worked mainly as a screenwriter and a director, and so I learned quite a bit about that, and I also learned how to be in charge, because as the director I usually work with you know, definitely back then TV was about a crew that is generally a lot larger than you have in photography, and so it gave me experience in how to deal with people, how to get the most out of everyone on set, how to get you know, the best result, and still stay in charge, because that's your job, you're in charge. And I think that even if I shoot with just one subject and without any assistance, that is still beneficial to me, to be able to be the guy who looks professional and in charge, while very often I don't have a clue what I'm doing. But I think one of my best talents is to you know, make people believe that I know what I'm doing. So yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, it's useful. I think that with creatives, our best work happens when we're right on the edge of something which kind of theoretically we should be able to do, but we've kind of never done before, or it's like, is this going to work? And there's that element of danger that really, that's where the exciting stuff happens. What would you say were the main differences between, because when you started, you've been doing this like what, 12, 13 years, something like that as a, yeah, so what would you say would be the main differences between when you started transitioning into photography sort of like 12, 13 years ago and now? Because obviously this was like before like social media, it was before Facebook, before YouTube, all of that stuff. Like what's been the differences, and how have you sort of managed to navigate that?
I feel that I have to reinvent myself and my business every 2 years, which is a hard thing to do. And I'm like in the first few years, it's kind of exciting, and now it's kind of very annoying to, you know, just, you know, at a certain point, it's not like I want to settle into doing the same thing, but definitely on the business side, and that's the side that it's the least interesting to me, but it's one that you have to keep in mind, is that you constantly have to think about how can I keep making a living with this, and things are changing so fast, which has its good sides but also the negative sides. When I just started, it was just like the first social media was blogs, and I kind of took it up pretty early on because I liked the idea of blogs, and it basically helped my business a great deal. It got me started, and also I was like one of the first probably who started doing YouTube, and do some photography related content on YouTube, and it got me a lot of followers early on, what would be considered a lot of followers back then, not now. And then, you know, social media took off, and I think that there's a big issue with how social media dictates what we as creators do, or at least I experienced how it affected me. Because, you know, you're always trying to keep up. You're always trying to do the right thing, and the right thing is different all the time. Like when I started Instagram, it was basically not done to post a picture that was not taken on your phone. And now it is like a curated version of ideal life that has nothing to do with real life. And, you know, I have teenagers now, and I also see how they are, how dangerous it can be that they get to see these perfect lives that don't really exist, and in a way I think it makes the photography or the creative landscape in general a lot smaller than it can be. I feel there was more creativity, there was more variety 5 years ago than there is now, and that's not, I don't want to be like the old guy complaining about that it used to be a lot better before, because it was in some things, and it is not in other aspects, but I feel like we need to start turning it around a bit for our own benefit, but also the benefit of a younger generation. You know, they grow up with phones, and you know, they see like all this perfection, and actually that perfection is becoming really boring, because I see so many of the same pictures by different people, and yeah, there's more to it, I think. And if I look back to, if I look through my archives and look at the pictures that are really valuable to me personally, then you know, those are rarely perfect things. Those are interesting things that happened and real things. And you know, I don't want to be living for Instagram. Instagram can be a reflection of my life, but I don't want to live to get like the right pictures on Instagram. I don't want to live with the pressure of, you know, that YouTube is a bit the same. I think it's an amazing resource. It's amazing that we have publishing at our own hands these days. But it can be such an incredible pressure, because lots of people, you know, they believe they have to post every week or even every day, and you know, sometimes you don't have anything to post, sometimes you don't want to post, and I think that's fine. Sometimes you want to post something that is not like happy, perfect life thing, and that should be possible too, I think. So social media and the influence on our landscape and on our work as photographers, it has incredible options. Like before, when we're talking about the refugee thing, it's basically Instagram, Facebook, YouTube that allow me to reach people, so it is a good thing. But having the power always comes with a certain responsibility to use it well. And yeah, I think I don't want to decide what or tell other people what to do, but I've thought a lot about it, and I feel like I have to be a bit more careful about it, and not let my creativity be dictated by what's in vogue on Instagram right now.
I think that's so important, and there's a pursuit of perfection in which we saw in the music industry, we've seen it in the film industry, and we're definitely seeing it in photography too, where people are unwilling to post anything that isn't, you know, completely like polished, blemish-free, auto-tuned, maxed out with all the filters and things on Instagram. Like, it has to be this kind of perfect version in terms of the lifestyle that it portrays, but the way that the thing is post-produced as well. And for me, it's the granular stuff that's interesting. It's the imperfections. It's the human stuff. And given that we're moving rapidly into a world where everything's going to be fucking AI, you know, there's going to be robot cameras that will take all the pictures for us, which is fine, and they'll probably do a great job. And if you want to go and get a corporate headshot done or something, like there won't be corporate headshot photographers. It'll be a little drone that comes in, flies through the window, takes it, and then you pay him a Bitcoin and he disappears. Fine. But for everything else, where you're trying to tell a story, where you're trying to evoke some sort of emotion, that's where it's the imperfections that come through, because that's what's human. And I think we're in a danger of losing that. So I think you're right, man. I think that the way to tackle that is to be a bit more real, is to be a bit more honest, is to be a bit more open and sharing about the things that really matter to you at that moment in time. What's on your mind, what you're feeling, what you're thinking, and get the stuff out there in a non-polished way necessarily, but that is telling the story, and have the story come first. You know, I think that's a huge thing, man. I think that's probably where the next battleground, as far as I see it, in terms of like the creative evolution of photography goes, is going to be between the AI stuff, which will polish everything for your, you know, basic, you know, if you want to do say like a corporate headshot or like a, you know, passport photo or something, like they'll do that really well. but they won't do so well at being able to go and photograph refugees because they don't know what they're looking at, man. They don't understand it. They don't have a son whose toys they brought there and can relate to it on that level that could be my kid going through that. They can't do that, and that's where the rubber hits the road. I think that's a really interesting way of putting it.
I think there's a place for everything, and although it's not my thing, I think there's a place for like a dream world and a glamorous world, but I think we should make it clear that it's a dream world and it's not like reality. Yeah. And it always breaks my heart when I shoot like particularly a young woman or like a teenager, and they look absolutely perfectly beautiful to me, with their little flaws, whatever, and they have such a low self-esteem because they compare themselves to images that are not real, and it breaks my heart that a perfectly intelligent, good-looking young person loses self-esteem because of a painting, basically, because of something that is not real. Yeah. But at the same time, I see, well, there's definitely a need for that reality, and there's definitely a lot of people who are experimenting with it. If you look at how a younger generation is embracing film and Instax film and these kind of things, that means that they also feel a need to discover the beauty of the imperfection and the little flaws and how they make someone who he is. So I'm not like overly negative about it, but it's just something that I try to keep in mind or in the back of my mind all the time, because I sense that even though I'm not a teenager anymore, I stopped being one a long time ago, maybe mentally I'm still one, but I fall into that same trap of trying to project an image that is not me, and projecting that image is one thing, but I feel like it can prevent you from living a fuller real life if you're always trying to, enjoying the moment with your family on holidays is what a holiday is about. And although I also enjoy taking pictures on my holidays, there are times where I'm like, I want to enjoy this sunset and not make the perfect sunset picture. Because then I'm not enjoying it, and then I'm directing my kids to stand in the right spot and things like that. So I do it on occasion because it's I'm a photographer and I enjoy that. But probably more times that I just let it go and maybe snap a memory on my phone for my family, and that's okay too. So it is about finding a bit of a balance in those things, I guess.
I think that's true, and it's important to remain in the now moment and present to that, especially when you've got your family around you, because I think there's a danger. I think all photographers we're addicted to the thing. It's an entity, photography, that just grows and grows. The more you kind of put into it, the more you get out of it. It's a fascinating thing, and I like what you said really early on, where you were like, you've been doing it all these years, and you're still kind of figuring it out. And I love that. Like there's a Jay Maisel, the New York guy, and he's like, what is he now, 90, something like that. And he said the other day, somebody said like, what does it feel like to have been doing photography all these days? You must be like an expert by now. And he said, I think I'm getting like towards the edges of what photography is, but I'm still peeling back the onion layers. And it's like, that's so true, man. That's so true. But at the same time, you can get lost in your art a little bit. And so, we go to somewhere, on holiday, we want to take amazing photos, and we get lost in that moment of like getting every angle, getting the perfect light, getting everything set up just how we want. And sometimes sometimes it's worth just pulling away from the camera and just savouring the now. You know, there's a brilliant book by Eckhart Tolle called The Power of Now, and it's just all about being mindful and present and being in the moment, because that's all we have. That's all we have is now. And so taking the time to have that balance, you know, so we're pursuing our art, but also not at the expense of the now, I think is tremendous. But tell me about the connection with Fuji. How did you start working with them, and what was the catalyst for all of that?
So I decided to make that switch to full Fuji, even though it was a bit of a daunting idea, and a lot of people say like, you can't do this. But I went ahead, bought an X Pro 1 with a 35, and then added an XE1, which was just new at the time, with an 1855, and that was my kit for a while, because that was pretty much all they had. And then the next assignment I got was to shoot for a triathlon team, a professional triathlon team, to shoot their promo pictures during their training camp in Lanzarote. And of course it was not like the perfect package for sports photography that you would think about. And you know, that I did some of the running shots, and then I had to ask people to wait for 2 minutes until the buffer was cleared to shoot the next pictures. But in a way, it worked out greatly just because of those limitations, and because I was forced to be close to the athletes, and I had to build a relation with the athletes to be so close to them. And I was very happy with the pictures, and the client was happy, and you know, that reinforced me that it was the right choice for me, although it was definitely not an option for everyone at that time. And then I think because I was one of the first ones using the system professionally, and because I had a bit of a reach as a photographer, Fuji found out about it, and first got in touch with Fuji Belgium, and then I was invited to Tokyo by Fujifilm Japan to talk about their cameras, lenses, the future. And that was an incredible experience. I was there with some of my heroes, David Hobby from Strobist, and Zacharias, and Kevin Bong. Yeah, really, I was like very honored to be part of that company. The fourth member was of the team was Kevin Mullins, which I didn't know him back then, but has become a really good friend and another hero of mine. But those meetings, it became clear that Fuji, you know, although it is a company, they want to make money, they want to leverage the reach that some photographers have, but they really do care about photography and the photographers. And just looking at the progress they made in firmware updates, in new products, in just like the following year, where so much of our ideas were implemented. Really, I found that really refreshing for a brand to look at photography in a different way. It was also like a less measured way, but more about, you know, just how it looks, how files look, how colors look, how out of focus areas look. So I really related to that, a bit more like the organic thing, although I hate that word. But you know, less digital, more about the story, and have these small compact cameras that take professional pictures. And it developed from there. And nowadays it's you know, it's a lot bigger, it's a lot more corporately structured, or however you want to call it. But the values are still there, I believe. They still do care about the photography. They still put a lot of trust in photographers, because like the latest project I did for them was something for their new 250mm f4 lens for the GFX, and you know, they basically assign you to do personal work in a way, and I really value and appreciate that a lot. And a lot of people aspire like brand deals and sponsorship and things like that, but often those deals are not worth what you get out of them as a photographer. But in this case, it's a special bond. It's more than just a working relationship. Has become a friend. A lot of friends in there. I got to meet a lot of other amazing photographers, and so in that way, it's a connection that I truly value, and I feel like Fuji is also valuing what I'm doing as a photographer.
I think what's absolutely fascinating to watch Fuji's sort of re-entry into the photography world in this big way with the mirrorless system is that the company itself, the FUJI X photographers, the other photographers like us who just use the products, there is such a feeling of community, of reciprocity, of sharing, and it's like open communication channels. It is such a refreshing thing in this modern day and age where you have these big companies that churn out products just to sort of fill out the range. It seems to me a lot of the time it's like, well, you know, we'll just add another one in there because it's a different price point, you know. Yeah,
and you know, it is a business, and I don't blame for Fuji that they're a company that are trying to make money, but but there's I see it in my business too. I'm in it, you know, it's my job. I have to feed my kids from my photography, so it is a business, but it doesn't mean that you cannot be in it for the long term and have certain values that you want to stick to. And in the short term, it might be more interesting, and even in the long term, if you're just looking at the money, there's probably ways to make more money, but you know, still at the end of the day, I want to be able to look in the mirror and not be ashamed of myself, and I think that goes for big companies as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's interesting. Like, one of my favourite car brands is Aston Martin, and for the first 100 years of their existence, they didn't make profit once, not once. So I'm not necessarily advocating that as a business model, but there's heart and there's soul and there's passion in those cars, and they built the cars that they wanted to build, and there's probably a middle ground, and I think Fuji seem to have found that well, where they're building the cameras that do have that bit of a heart and soul to them. You know, they are. It's as much about the tactile nature of the cameras themselves and how they feel in the hand as it is about the colour reproduction and making a thing that looks as, again, like organic is a terrible word and film-like is a stupid word too, but there's something about colour that Fuji understand that give a warmth and a life to the way that their images look that is hard to find in other companies. So I think that kind of middle way is good, and you don't need to be the biggest company in the world. You just need to be big enough to supply your products, to supply good products to a hungry audience that will support you because they value what you're doing. And if you can do that and pay everybody's wages, then great. You don't need to be the biggest in town. You just need to be good at what you do.
Absolutely, I agree.
So, tell me about Kage Collective. This looks really cool.
Well, actually, I should say Kage Collective.
Kage. My apologies. There we go. I was thinking it was like the dude out of Mortal Kombat.
Well, yeah. I usually refer to it as Kage 2 because it's just easier to pronounce.
Right.
But it means shadow in Japanese.
Ah, okay.
Well, it's basically a group of now 7 people from all over the world. It's founded by Patrick Leroc, Canadian photographer, amazing guy. And now we're 7 people, and over the years the group has, some people have come, some have gone. It's a dynamic thing. What we've been doing have been changing too, but it's basically a collective of photographers who want to explore storytelling in any form. and words are part of it, images are part of it, sometimes even video is part of it, and it's an outlet for all of us. It's also a bit of a lab setting where we try out a lot of things, and like, you know, we talked about being a bit more real and getting those real images back, and we actually started the beginning of this week, like 2 days ago, we started a project that's called Chronicle 90, where we will just, instead of doing a monthly issue at a certain theme, we're just trying to document our daily life, you know, just pictures of where we happen to be at the day that we are supposed to add something, because each photographer has his own day to publish something. Okay. So yeah, we try to be a voice in it. We try to make interesting stories, and also try to see what storytelling means today, because we have so many options today. I think we're all a bit a fan of like the classic photojournalistic essays that used to be like big in the 50s and 60s and even before. But we all know that classic way, it still exists, but you know, there's no money for it anymore. There's no audience for it anymore, maybe. So it's about finding new ways to tell stories, and you know, there's the front end, which is our website, where the stories actually are. But to me personally, it's just as interesting to our back end. We just have this group on an app called Slack, where we're constantly in touch and pushing each other, helping each other to do new things in a very, very open way, and that's been so enriching to my photography, and I think to all the guys, to, you know, and I think you can see it in the results. We don't aim to reach millions of people. We don't aim to be mainstream, although we're not against mainstream either. But you can see us trying, and you know, the whole process of what it is, what storytelling is, and how we see it is just as interesting as the stories in itself, I think.
I think that's fascinating. I'm fascinated by that same subject, and as I've been getting more into including words, for example, with a photo essay. I think that's tremendously powerful, and I like the idea of adding video to that too. I think that you're right. It is changing, and I can't see why something like a modern version of Life magazine, for example, wouldn't be fascinating to people. But maybe that's just very subjective, because I would find it fascinating, and you would, and maybe it's only nerdy photographers like us who just really love that stuff. But what do you think? What do you think has changed fundamentally? Because we're storytelling animals. Like, that's the thing that sets us apart, and it's the thing that allows us to make order out of chaos, is telling stories about things. It's how we orient ourselves in the world. What do you think has changed fundamentally about storytelling, and how do you see it changing, like, into the future as well?
That's the most difficult question anyone has asked me in the last months. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Well, first of all, I think that if you look at the heyday of documentary photography and photography essays, it was just like one of the only ways to tell these kind of stories. And now we have
pre-TV, pre-internet.
That was before TV, before internet. So yeah, that is that has changed everything. On the other hand, you know, as a photographer back then, you needed to be one of the lucky ones who got into Time Life to get your story published. and seen by people. So I think it is sometimes, you know, the long form storytelling is not always easy these days, because we're so used to that instant gratification and short sound bites and things like that. But there is still a way, there's still people enough who are interested in, you know, I sometimes see look at these independent documentaries on YouTube, for example, and some amazing work has been made. And sometimes it's also very low tech, like people with just a phone that still managed to capture our attention, still managed to do so. And but I think that the personality of the person that is putting out the story has become a much bigger factor, because it will in a way decide upon the audience that you will send your story to, because it's your audience, which makes things like pretty different. But I'm not against it. The one big challenge is that today we have access to all the information that we want, to all the people that we want. We can see the points of view of, you know, the whole spectrum of people on any subject. But because of algorithms, we usually only get to see the things by people that are within the same mindset, because, you know, the algorithms analyze everything we look at. And like, for example, if I'm interested in reconnecting with nature or whatever, then I get in touch with people who are also interested into it. But maybe I also should hear the point of view of people who are like, no, we should invest in cities, whatever. I'm just making something up. But if I have a certain point of view, it's actually more interesting to read conflicting points of view than to hear what I am already convinced of. And I think the danger of algorithm-based media is that you run around in the same little circles and don't have an idea about how the other opinions fit in, or how big the other opinions are. Because I have the impression sometimes, if I look at my Facebook or Instagram feed, that everybody thinks pretty much the same way as I do, and that's simply not true. It's just because I think that way, I look at certain things, and all the technology behind social media gives me more of the same. It's like we all get to see the work of the same photographers because they have a strong social media preference. But like my girlfriend, she's a photographer too, but she has other influences than I have. Mine are very often into that you know, social media area, while she's more into the art world and things like that.
Right, yeah.
She, you know, we have the same social media channels, but she points out photographers to me, exhibitions to me that I've never heard of. While they're sometimes like very, very big in their world. So it's important to understand that there's so much more outside of your own circles, even if you have the feeling that the circle is like huge. It probably isn't, because the algorithms keep it within the same point of view. And you know, there's something that I like about linear television. The fact that there's a lot of pointless things on TV, but if you just put on the TV, at least you have a chance that you will discover something that you didn't know you were interested in. And in social media, that chance is a lot less. So yeah, it's interesting, it's changing, but it's also something that I try to stay open to, is to find these other influences that may not come within my circle, but are probably more valuable than hearing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, isn't it? Like, it's so the things that are changing about storytelling are sort of so much dependent on the platform and the way that they're served up to us, and that's something that wasn't really the case in the past, as you say, with like TV or Life magazine. Like, everybody bought the same magazine, everybody turned into the same 4 TV channels or whatever it was, and so there was this continuity of narrative that we were all kind of aware of a few people that were doing things and everybody knew about them. And these days there's lots of sub-communities all doing different things, but because of the way the algorithms orient, then we tend to feed into this echo chamber. It's fascinating. It's like, yeah, we're building our own audiences and then talking to them, as opposed to jumping onto onto an audience that's already there and then being part of a much wider set of voices that are being fed through that platform.
Yeah, and you know, there should be, every algorithm should include some kind of random function that they just throw something like completely out of your own you know, field of interest at you every now and then. Yeah,
that would be cool. It might come, you never know. But tell me what projects you've got coming up, and what are the things that we can look forward to from you?
Well, as far as upcoming project, there's a lot of just like work ahead of me, trying to figure out some new workshops and things. But it's, at this point, it's still a bit vague. Now, the thing that really got me excited this year was that project I did for Fuji with the 250mm lens for the GFX system. They basically asked me to do something around portraiture, and I thought about what to do, and the easy thing would have just, you know, been just to get a good model, book a studio, and get some nice girl images. But as you have probably noticed, I'm really considering where my place in photography is, and I think I came to the conclusion that I should use it more to, you know, tell stories that I'm passionate about. And so I decided to turn this assignment into a bit of a project where I shoot wild people. And by wild people, I mean people who have a very strong connection with the natural world, but at the same time live within our Western society. And I photographed 5 or 6 people for this project, made a behind the scenes video. It's on the Fujifilm Global YouTube page if you want to look at it. But I shot pictures of a rewilding coach, a hunter, a fisherman, a sheep herder, and I found these encounters like incredibly fascinating. Had an amazing time, and I also feel like a lot of people seem to connect with these images. And I really want to keep that project going, and, you know, find more people that kind of fit the bill, because I think those people are like, they're inspiring me, and I know that they're inspiring other people too, because like many, I kind of feel like we moved away from nature way too much by now, and we kind of have to figure out a way to get back, and at the same time use technology to get back, or make it easier to get back, or whatever. So that's something that it gave me such a boost. It basically made me work day and night to get the project done before the deadline and before I went on my family summer holidays. But it's so exciting that I really want to keep doing it, want to see in which direction I can take this, because it's basically just like a portrait of someone in his natural environment, but also a portrait that tells a story, and maybe there will be words to go with the pictures. I haven't really figured out what form or where it should go, but it's so exciting to me that I really I'm really going on with it. I just don't know how it will turn out or in which shape or form it will continue. But yeah, that's it felt like while I was working on that project, it felt like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Wow, that is awesome, man. There's something really inspirational about that whole, there's such a philosophy behind that and such a thought process. It seems like it's been the catalyst for something that resolves a lot of the things that we've been talking about through this conversation as well. It's like telling stories with your cameras. It's about doing something that's good. It's bringing the spotlight on the individual. It's putting the connection back between the mind, the body, the environment, everything. That sounds so cool, man. I'm really looking forward to seeing how that sort of evolves in time and how it all sort of shapes up in the future. So have you got plans to go out and shoot more shoot more subjects for this, or are you going to be working with the ones that you've got and then sort of figuring out if you're going to put words to it, or what's the sort of next phase, or is that up in the air still a bit?
Well, it's still all up in the air, but I'm really looking, I'm researching, I'm making connections to find more people to fit this idea, because it's not like I want to follow one person for weeks or months or years. It's more like, I think it gives me a good feeling knowing that some people actually connect in a way that I would want to connect, because if they can do it, then other people must be able to do it, including me. So I think it's about a voyage, a discovery of these people, because you know the photography part of these. There's one shot, and I think that's the best shot that I have in the project so far, is of a Dutch hunter, and I think the photography part actually took 5 minutes. But it was a 2-day thing to get those 5 minutes, and it's not like you know, the actual taking pictures is 5 minutes, but the time spent before and after that with this man was just as important to those pictures. And I think I got to the point that photography or the picture is not like the only goal in itself. It's more like the passport function of a camera that allows me into words and worlds that I haven't been in, allows me to meet interesting people. And the passion for the picture is still there, because it's my way of expressing something, but it has become a bit bigger. And for the last couple of years, I kind of struggled a bit about what's the direction I should be going in. And with this project, it kind of all the pieces of the puzzle kind of fell into place. And it's not like I'm going to only shoot wild people anymore, but it gave me a direction to go into. And you know, projects like this are not gonna pay the bills, but I think you know, from the business point of view, I can also take things out of this project, and you know, I'm shooting commercial work most of the time, but I think I should probably go after commercial clients that in some way connect to trying to, you know, make this world a little bit of a better place. And I know that sounds a bit corny and vague, but it probably makes more sense to me than I can explain right now.
I get it, man. I think what you were saying there about the camera being a passport is such a cool thing. Like it's something I'm it just resonates with me so much. You know, the idea that it's this little black box that in itself is just a little idiotic bit of plastic and some glass and things, but it gives you access to people, places, adventures, experiences that without it you would never have. And so yeah, you hopefully get some cool photos to come away with as well. And maybe that's something that's monetizable, maybe that's something that's a personal project, whatever it is, but it's like that's almost the byproduct. And it's the thing that allows you, it's a vehicle that allows you to live your life in a way that is so blessed and full of excitement and cool people and cool places. It's just amazing. And I think by the sound of this project, it really seems to have kind of set you on a really interesting trajectory, I think, there, and it's going to be so cool to see how this all sort of rolls out. It's really cool, man. But I look forward to seeing all that. Where can people find you and follow all of this cool stuff and the other projects that you're involved in?
So yeah, my main website is bertstephani.com. That's my website for clients, photography clients. And I also have bertstephani.info, which is aimed at photographers. I kind of picked up blogging a bit again since a long time. It's not like, don't expect any consistency in it. I sometimes just feel like writing something about something, and then that's the place to do it. And you know, otherwise there's, you know, Facebook, Twitter. I don't really use Twitter, but Instagram, YouTube, and it's basically always just my name, Bert Stephani. But I think I try to tie it in more and more, all with the two websites. Like the .info is for photographers and .com is for clients. And yeah, that's where most of that stuff lives. A lot of that stuff comes with a bit of a delay. It's like I should redo my portfolio. I should have redone it a year ago, but actually I've redone it a year ago. But you know, it feels like things are in motion right now, and sometimes I just need to wait it out until it gets like completely clear. Like it's clear in my mind, but I cannot really describe it perfectly yet. And it's the same with portfolio, and that's why I'm probably gonna redo it pretty soon. But yeah, it's always a work in progress, and that's also the interesting part of photography, is that you know, if you get the feeling that it's not going to be in progress anymore, then I'm going to quit. Yeah, man. It's never done. There's always something new. There's always a new evolution of it. There's a new layer of the onion to peel back. Well, but this has been one of the most fascinating and yeah, just wonderful conversations. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Go and visit Bert at bertstephani.com, bertstephani.info, and his name all over social media. Sign up to his workshops, lectures, speaking engagements, follow him, and yeah, watch the trajectory of this man go up and up, even further than it already has, because I think that by the sound of it, these projects sound amazing. But thank you very much for joining me. Really appreciate it, man. Thank you. I really enjoyed the talk, and I am grateful for your patience of me trying to... It's been a pleasure. You made a ton of sense, man. Really appreciate it. All right. Talk soon, man. Cheers.